think about the fact that this soil probably took hundreds of years to form.
Hello, my name is Christine Brown. I'm a field crop sustainability specialist.
All right. Well, good day, everyone. And on behalf of Christine Brown, myself, Andrew Barry, and the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Agribusiness, I want to welcome you to the 2026 March Manure Mondays. You can see based on the t-shirts behind me and the hat that we've got the full attire ready for what we should have for another good year of March Manure Mondays. So thanks for joining us. I'm not sure if you're here for your first time or if you're a regular, but we'd love to hear from you. So Quinn, I'm going to ask you right off the bat, if you could pull up our first poll question and we can find out a little bit about who all is joining us today, what your background might be. So take a moment and answer that poll if you would. And I will tell you in the background, that's Quinn Harder, who is hosting for us. Interestingly enough, Quinn was our summer student back in 2021 when we hosted in Ontario the Manure Expo, and we just can't seem to get rid of Quinn. He's still hanging around, so we love to have him helping us out in the background here. So if you can't answer the poll, then feel free to post in the chat as well where you're from today, who you are. Just love to have the interaction. So what do we got in store this year? There are actually 5 Mondays again in March this year. So that means we have another total mixed ration of 5 events. And we're going to look at things like manure and cover crops, integrated manure management, manure safety, organic amendments, and contaminants. So nice broad spectrum of topics for this year. So let's take a look at our poll now and see what we've got. Okay, we have a nice mix as expected. Glad to see, lots of farmers there, industry, academic. Good. We've got some consultants as well. And I'm not sure what happened to the few people that thought it was Manicure Mondays, but anyhow, you're welcome to join us and learn about manure. So just some quick logistics in the background here. So we run this 45 to 60 minutes. We will cut off sharp by 3 o'clock. We do record these. They are going to be posted, and they'll be posted on OMAFA Field Crop News. You will get sent that link if you missed it or you want to revisit one. They will all be there. We do really look for your questions, your comments in the chat. So love to hear from you that way. Do not want to hear your dog barking, no, or your cat meowing. So please do stay muted throughout the session. This session has been awarded a CEU credit for Certified Crop Advisors. That code will be posted at the end. And it also, for those in Ontario who know, is a KSE, which is a knowledge sharing event. Notify us in the chat if that is your case at the end, and we'll be sure to get you what you need for that. Okay, enough talk. Time to rock. Let's get going here on our topic today. Today's topic is moving manure further, which is a great topic. And I will say, I remember back years ago seeing for Ontario a map that showed the distribution of manure. And it was quite interesting that it had a historic distribution, which was kind of all over the province. And then it had the trending and then the current distribution, which showed pockets of manure here, pockets there, and then other areas that were manure deserts per se. And so it's interesting how that's changed and of course farms getting bigger. So there's definitely a need for us to move manure further. So today what we're going to do is we have three presenters. We're going to give them each some time, and then we're going to have a chat as a panel at the end. So I'd like to start off by introducing our first presenter, Glen Arnold. Glen is not new to us. Is not new to anybody here who's been part of Manure, Manure Manager, Manure Expo, the whole bit. Glen from Ohio State has been doing this great work for many years. And Glen, we're glad to have you back here with us today. Um, and we're going to let Glen start it off. He's going to give us a bit of an overview, kind of the overall thoughts in this regard, and then we'll take it forward from there. All right, I'll turn it over to you, Glen.
Great. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm from Ohio State University. I work with manure as a field specialist. So that means I'm about 100 miles from campus. And that's just a nice, comfortable distance to be from the university for me. So I'm going to spend some time today talking about manure, what we do, what we observe. From some of the drone videos, I'll just admit up front, I have a drone, so I like shooting videos of farmers and when they're working. I remember about 25 years ago when I was asked to swing by a poultry farm and review their records because they were getting a lot of heat from people. And I was really shocked to find out how far we had moved poultry litter in Ohio. It's not unusual for these large poultry farms. And we talk about large, 2, 3 million birds on site to move manure more than 100 miles. Once they put it on a truck, it can go a lot of places. And that fascinated me because liquid manure, we probably hadn't moved more than 5 miles at any time that I'd ever seen in the state. So in the United States, our farms continue to get large. We don't have a quota system. So dairy farms from 300 to 4 or 5,000 cows are pretty common as we lose more and more of our smaller producers over the years. And that means we have a lot of liquid manure storage. Our storages on farms can be 50 to 60 million pretty easily. This is just a farm that's got two large manure ponds that you can see here. It's pumping day. They've got two commercial applicators pulled into this. There's another manure pond in the back. So you've got manure ponds here. That looks like a freshwater pond back there and perhaps there. But we have to collect everything on our dairies. That means any water that comes in contact with feed on the concrete has to be collected along with your cooling water, your plate water, your manure, your urine, all that has to be collected. So that comes out to be probably between 40 and 45 gallons per cow per day on average when you look at that. And probably only about less than 30 is actually groundwater that they pull out of a ground each day at these farms per cow. Our sow farrowing units are generally about 5,000 sows, and you can see the lagoon off to the right-hand side. So liquid manure in our sow units. And our swine finishing buildings are mostly enclosed like this. These are two what we call double-wide buildings. They would hold about 2,500 pigs each, so about 5,000 pigs on site at a time. These are weaned to finish, so they'll market at around 300 pounds, so they'll turn these buildings twice a day. And the reason I'm there is it's pumping day, so you can see the pumping equipment set up to the side. So that's when I get a lot of my pictures is when I'm out working with my commercial manure guys. Now, the majority of our swine manure and on our buildings is generally handled by tankers still, and that's changing. There's a shift as we get more manure in one spot. We're moving more to drag hose systems. But this is an organic farmer who's side dressing corn, and he's made the investment in a pretty large tanker, and then he does a lot of commercial manure work, hauling manure to make payments on this thing. But that's a pretty common way that we haul manure. And we're always conscientious of road damage. This is the number one gripe of most people around livestock farms. When livestock farms are built, we often tear these roads up pretty badly. And then, of course, we don't help ourselves when we're hauling haylage and silage and manure and everything else, feed up and down rural roads. Now, we've been pretty good for a lot of years about trying to take advantage of liquid manure. This pond is pretty much low nutrient water, basically runoff from the lot, things like that. So we can irrigate that. And they've just basically got it set up to irrigate this wheat field here on the side. This is pretty early in the spring, probably about the 1st of April or so. And again, it's a great use. They can run that multiple times. Probably won't be enough nitrogen for the wheat in that manure or in that water, but they'll put the nitrogen on as needed with a plane or with a fertilizer buggy. and be pretty satisfied. But again, a way of moving a lot of manure without getting out on the roads very far. For irrigation systems that are usually within a mile or two of the farm, we do a lot of steel pipe in that regard. This is just an example. We've got a steel pipe that goes out to a field. We can hook a hose to it to pump it and pressurize it with manure, and then put it into an irrigation system like this. These are fairly common. Many of our dairies, our bigger dairies, will have half a dozen irrigation systems around them. Some of our sow farms will irrigate on corn. They'll wait till the corn is up and growing, and then they'll irrigate on top of it. And then, again, drones will show you most amazing things when you look in the fields about nutrient application and drainage and things like that. So always enjoy looking at drone pictures. Now, when we get serious about the large manure ponds, then we get some really big equipment. This is 12-inch hose that's coming off here heading out to the field. And this guy can pressurize pretty easily. And we run around maybe 250 pounds of pressure at the pump, not much more than that. It'll drop, of course, as the manure flows through the line and there's losses. But eventually it'll get out a certain distance. And sometimes, that last pump had 3 tires. This has 2 tires. So this was their big pump originally. And now it's been regulated as a booster pump. And we'll put these in the lines on an as needed basis to keep our flow where we want it to be. As we've gotten bigger with our hoses, we don't need booster pumps nearly as frequently in our lines. And then we've always been creative on how to get those lines out to the fields. If your township trustees and your county commissioners are cooperative, they may let you shut lines down or roads down for temporary time periods. We always try to take advantage of existing culverts to get hoses in and around where we need to go. By the same token, we'll also bore holes underneath roads. So here we are. This commercial applicator owns the fields here. And this little system, even though it looks brand new, has been around, I think, about 3 years now. Still looks awful nice. And again, he's just getting manure from one side of the road to the other. Sometimes in small ditches, we'll lay the hoses through those ditches, and that's legal. And then here in the last few years, we see a lot more of these bridges occurring. The source of the manure is coming in from the right-hand side, going over the manure bridge, off it goes. This guy actually had 2 manure bridges in the system this day, but he's pumping manure in more distant fields by using manure bridges to get across. The company said that they basically sell about 15 to 20 of these a year. It's a company that's right here on the edge of Ohio. So it's nice to see that they're still doing pretty good. You just need to make absolutely sure. These have a rating on them of 16 feet 4 inches on height, but it's actually about 2 feet higher than that because they're figuring that they're going to settle on both sides of that road a little bit. So even though the sign says 16.4, on flat land, they're closer to 18 feet. And we all know semis need about 14 to make sure they get through without catching these things. And then we also have relied on our traditional tankering of manure. Nobody's more popular in the state of Ohio than tanker drivers, especially during silage harvest and especially during manure application. And they fight each other and they steal from each other. And there's some hard feelings sometimes on where these drivers end up going and who they're working for. But I've seen as many as 25 of these in a fleet when they're hauling manure from a great distance. And this applicator's so driver's going to jump out pneumatically. He's going to open that top valve and he's going to dump his product into this dumpster. And we really have grown a lot in frac tanks and dumpsters. And then this tractor has the power in the PTO system to charge this line and go out about a half-mile hose to the field that they're putting the manure on. The other thing about it, if you review this too, is how the driver slowed down and eased into this. He didn't slam on the brakes when he got close. And we need that because we don't want to tear up these roads any more than we absolutely have to. And so I've seen where drivers have been let go because they've not been careful about how they come in. And then when it's in the field, the commercial applicators can do what they do very well at, and that's to apply manure as best they can. Well, this takes out the middleman. You're taking the tanker directly from the dairy or the swine farm and you're putting it in a field. This isn't very popular with a lot of neighbors, but if this truck's going to do a half a mile. So you figure the 10-foot width, figure about a 6,500 gallon load, figure half of a mile. it comes right out to between 11 and 12,000 gallons per acre. And that's our normal application rate for low density dairy manure in the state of Ohio. So again, even though this isn't popular, is still agronomically a good choice to make when they were doing manure applications. The other thing we've seen the growth of has been satellite ponds. This one, you don't see any livestock barns around it because it belongs to a commercial manure applicator. And he built it basically because when in the wintertime, when we're not supposed to be putting manure out, when he gets calls from customers who say, hey, we're desperate. We did not get our hog manure applied last fall, or we didn't get this done, or we broke a hose and built up much quicker than we expected. Then he's got a place that he can put manure in the winter months, and then he can later land apply that to his own ground. So satellite ponds, there's two groups that are building these. One has been our commercial manure applicators, and the others have been our larger dairies. And here's another one. This is not a dairy farm, of course. This is a machine shed. This is Fry Brothers, and what they're doing is they basically have a receiving pit here that is built to the permitted standards that we have when we have our permitted farms, and they're land applying their manure today. But again, Fry Brothers, for example, when they're set up and running, there may be a fleet of 10 or 12 trucks if they're applying manure to a field. And when they get finished with a field and they have to reset their hose, what they'll simply do is divert those tankers to this pond. And they've got two concrete ramps here that they can dump down. And again, it's manure that they can apply to their own property at some point. If the dairy's paying $125 an hour for those truckers to be running, I'm sure they'd much rather have them dumping manure in this receiver spot than they would just sit there idly by the road and wait for the drag hose system to get reset. So that's again part of the reason why we see the growth of these satellite ponds. And if I get a call from a desperate pork producer in the wintertime, I always think about who has these ponds and how they can get their manure to them if they have to. I thought this was interesting. This is a satellite pond in New York. We were there for the expo last summer or 2 summers ago. And this guy had about a ton of concrete or more sitting here, probably 2 or 3 tons. And he just had a concrete pipe or a metal pipe put through that concrete, and that goes to his pond. And then he basically just anytime he wants to put manure over there, if it's a spring, he could do it. In the fall, he could do it, or even in the winter, if the ground is frozen, he can just basically unroll a hose to that concrete pipe, hook it on, and feel comfortable about pumping poop over there. And again, if you ever pump manure through a long hose, you definitely want to have something big and solid and heavy on the other end to hold that in place. Now, our satellite ponds have also evolved quite a bit. This is one of the newer ones that was built by Bridgewater up in Northwest Ohio. And this pond's about 2 to 3 miles from the dairy itself. And it's got an underground pipe that I don't have a very good picture of, but it comes in over here in the corner. And so they can fill this anytime they want to with manure from the main dairy. But they also have a nice drive up system for semis to come in there and dump manure and then exit out of there. And when you get a closer look at these dump areas that they've built in some of the newer ponds, and there's 2 or 3 of these that I've looked at, basically they have a good concrete area for the semi to pull on. Then they have a nice grate here. So if the semi releases underneath the belly of the semi, they can dump it right down into here. If it's a side release, they can shoot that right down into the side or the edge of this. So it can absorb some of that energy that's being shot out of there. If you ever work with these, I really emphasize these berms that they have on the sides of these things. You've got to keep that manure going where you want it to go. You can't have it shooting off the side. Semi drivers aren't always the world's greatest about lining directly up where they should on these slides. And I've seen a couple where they've undercut the side of this concrete quite badly with erosion. So I don't think it's going to last nearly as long as it could. So these concrete systems that they've put in place should be long term, should last a long time for us. The other thing we worked at, or we've seen a lot of lately, is the use of high density polyethylene pipe. These are flexible pipes somewhat, and they're, when you read the websites, very popular for sewer systems in cities, very popular for potable water in cities, seem to be about indestructible. I would just emphasize that because we deal with high pressures, these pipes are about 1.25 inches thick. So when you have a 12-inch diameter pipe, you're losing about 2.5 inches to the thickness of the pipe. And then when they put these pipes together, they weld them. Now, it doesn't look like much, but I had one that they cut apart and you really couldn't tell where the old pipe started and the new pipe began. It's just a very seamless weld on the inside. And they say they're very, very strong. That's what gives them a lot of positive use. And I think we're going to see more of this in agriculture. The way these are set up is we've got pipe coming in here. It's going to visit this riser, and then it's going to go off this side to the left. And when you look at these things, this is not a high pressure air. We're going to blow a pig through this thing. This is a air release on the pipe, and they'll leave that cracked slightly, or they'll certainly crack it before they go to access this at all, because you don't want to have high pressure and hurt somebody with one of these systems. But the way this works is this is a riser, and this is the control valve for the riser, because this is a T underneath this. And if you want manure to come up that riser, you will open that valve and let that manure come up that riser. If you want the manure to continue to another riser on down the line, then you'll open this valve, and that will allow that to go on down to the next place in the line. So that's the way you always have two valves with each riser in the field. Now, what they'll do eventually is they'll disconnect this collar that connects those two risers. And I think this picture will show that a little bit. If we go back for just a second, see these bolts that are holding this one on? These are those bolt holes that were there. So this is the riser, and then this is the top that goes on top of that riser when it's not in use. And they'll simply snap that in place, and it'll stay there and be fine. Again, they'll leave it cracked a little bit to make sure there's no gas buildup in there. And then when the time comes you want to use it, you could put an irrigation system on it. You could put a Rain 360 unit on it, or you could put a regular drag hose person on it. And so for the regular drag hose usage, this is the elbow that's going to fit right on top of this. So they're going to clamp this on there. You can see they put a nice handle on it for lifting. And then so this will be pointing off to the side, and you hook your drag hose to it and be ready to go. Now, they emphasize you can't have a rotation here. Like this thing could spin, but I'm sure you don't want to put any more pressure on those risers than you need to with a hose. But you could spin it if it's better to be facing east and west, that type of stuff. So it's really, really common. You can see this riser was just buried last fall, or this hose was just buried last fall, and it goes off to this side. This dairy has one that goes one direction that's almost 6 miles in length, more than 5.5 anyhow. And then it's got another one they just installed, and this is it, that goes about 2 miles in the opposite direction. So it's going to give them access to a lot of ground in those areas. And again, perhaps you've got an irrigation system that was used before in this field. Perhaps they'll continue to use that, but you can have a lot of freedom and flexibility. And when we talk about why we would want to have those opportunities, at least in my book, we try as much as we can to put manure down as often as we can on growing crops. In a lot of our soils, we're very heavy clays. So it's really difficult to put manure down before crops are planted in the spring. We've had some cool, wet springs that when we finally can get in the fields, we just want to get going. So a lot of times we'll come back in and put manure on top, newly planted corn or soybeans without too much trouble. And the other thing we like to put manure on is wheat. This dairy uses a lot of wheat for straw, which surprised me because I thought they all made wheat silage off most of that. But this is just a swine finisher guy who's applying 4,000 gallons of liquid swine manure per acre on his wheat. And that'll provide every bit the yield of commercial fertilizer and then just a little bit more. So we do a lot of this. This is very, very common with all our commercial applicators. Gives them a chance to get out their equipment out and running in late March, early April in Ohio. Now, my heart and soul is in side dressing corn because we can get about 12 to 15 bushel more per acre by side dressing corn with liquid manure like this guy's doing than we can with 28% UAN. But again, this is something we really like to emphasize. It's just got too tight of a window for most people. You're usually talking maybe 3-4 weeks to get this done in the spring. And everybody's so busy with everything else from weed control to replanting to finishing planting to whatever. So it's not always done, but we really try. And if we can have pipes out further into fields, we would have more options to do this, less hose needed to get there. And this will be another use. This is going on forages between cuttings. The dairy is way up on the top right. They just harvested this thing the day before, so the commercial applicator can come in and they'll get better dairy regrowth, better yield with their next cutting as a result of this, especially on dry summers like we've been going through. The last 3 summers have been very dry for us. So this is just a good chance. And again, with the amount of potash that forages take off of ground and phosphorus as well, you can put a lot of dairy manure back on these fields between cuttings, and still a very sensible thing to do to keep your phosphorus balanced. As I said before, we oftentimes don't put too much manure down on our heavy potting clays before we plant. So this is just the Unimans are simply putting manure on top of corn after it's about V3 stage, 3 true leaves on this ground. Corn looks kind of crappy from a distance, but that's just common for this heavy clay soil that we work with. Do a nice job. These guys go across a lot of acres every year, probably upwards of 500-600 acres easily. And again, it's a window for the dairy to put liquid out on a field. And so you're adding moisture, which is usually appreciated by the corn. And you're adding probably you'll get 35, 40 pounds of usable nitrogen by the time we're done with nitrogen loss and things like that. Kind of depends on when the next rain is going to come. If you look at those fields after Unimans are been across them, you can see their tracks at the V3 stage of growth. But generally speaking, the field looks pretty good. Silage corn, and the fact we got manure on there, that's a pretty acceptable exchange to have for the most part. The other thing that's arrived in the last few years has been these 360s. We have gone from 0 to probably 25 operating systems in Ohio, and probably going to add a half a dozen to 10 a year for a while, I think. They're popular because they're automated. You can turn them loose and let them apply manure and do your thing, and they'll do a nice job. And here's a 360 that's running on some corn. Sorry about that sound. I didn't think I had any sound on this one. But it's, again, we're just putting liquid manure, dairy manure, on corn, and they'll make as many as 5 or 6 trips in a season across these things. And when you think of a season, we cut cereal rye or triticale off of this field, then we planted corn, then we started putting manure on it, and then we'll harvest this and go back in with another triticale or cereal rye cover crop, which again will make for feed the following spring. In an ideal world, they are run across here. These hoses are only about 3 inches outside diameter. They're not very big. We pump about 250 gallons a minute through them, perhaps at best. And then the way they're designed, they follow the same tracks as basically the guy that planted that field. They use the same share file. So they put manure on the outer 8 rows on this 16-row applicator on the way down, the outer 8 hoses, which is 16 rows, and then the inner 8 hoses on the way back, which they're doing now. And again, that takes each of those hoses, does 2 rows. So it's a pretty big setup. It works really, really well. All 3 wheels are positive traction driven. I've seen them go through some pretty deep mud holes and pull right up out of there. They have diesel engines on them. And they're supposed to have enough bells and whistles to let you know when things are not working. This would be, it's hard to get enough nitrogen through just regular dairy manure for silage crop to be full as big as it could be. So this is one of those satellite ponds that got a pump coming out of the pond. It splits because they have 2 hoses going out to 2 different fields, and they got those 360s running in each of the fields at the same time. And what they're doing here is they're putting 28% UAN, liquid nitrogen, into each of those lines. And so they're supplementing the nitrogen amount so that they can get better, taller silage, heavier silage, more grain in there, that type of stuff. And it seems to be working pretty well for us. Now, if we had wet growing seasons, maybe it wouldn't be as smooth, but we've had 3 dry ones in a row. This was triticale that was planted last fall. It was bone dry when they planted it, so they simply turned the 360s loose. These guys could do about 10 acres an hour, I think. It all depends on their width, of course, but speed-wise, they're not, you can walk right with them and make repairs and stuff. You're not chasing these things down the field at all. But again, working pretty good, quiet, all by itself, doing its thing. And then you see them used, this was a November 15th application. Again, we were really dry that fall, so this equipment could run. This had already come toward me, putting manure out the outer hoses, and now it's in reverse, backing up, rolling the hose back up, putting manure on the inner ones. Now, this one here is not putting poop out today. It should be. This one is, that one is, and that one is not, but it should be. So it's plugged. But the front ones are all doing their job. And again, by using the same number of hoses on the way up as the way back, you can keep your manure flow pretty even with these guys. So, in a kind of a summary slide, when we talk about moving manure further, it's kind of something we need to do. I think the less mess we can make, the happier our neighbors are going to be. The less road damage we can make, the happier our township trustees are going to be. Less hose needed makes her more of a happy commercial manure applicator because he or she doesn't have to set out as much hose. And if we can keep trucks off the road, I think that reduces our liability. Saw some data out of Wisconsin a year or two ago where when you look at the three places we usually have manure spills on the farm, in the field, or transportation wise, someplace in between, the in between has been growing in recent years as we try to move manure further and we have more accidents and things, or we get hose or holes and hoses and those types. Depreciation of the buried line, I think that helps. Everybody likes to be able to charge things off. I have down here maybe safer from damage from unhappy people because we've seen instances of people deflating tile plugs and letting them pop out and allowing pollution to occur. We've had drag hoses that work fine one day, and the next day when they fire them up, they've got a big cut in them where it looks like someone took an axe to them. So, we've had some of that type of damage. That I've seen where they reports where people hang log chains in cornfields trying to mess up the choppers that people are running. So you have a lot of that occur. You get a few beers and somebody at a bar, you just never know what they might come up with. So I think it also help make these things pay if we can take opportunities to use them to put manure on growing crops. I think that's a good use of manure. So with that, that was kind of my conclusion. I can stop sharing, and I think questions come later on today.
That's awesome, Glenn. While I got you, I'm just gonna pull a couple of questions that are specific to you right now.
Sure.
Tucker was asking about the vandalism and so on. I think you already addressed that in your last comments there. Dave was wondering back to when you're showing the pictures of the drag hose in the cornfield, and this is a pretty common question for people when they see that. It's like, what's not only the manure but the drag line? What's it doing to the corn? So can you comment on that?
Well, we have 5 years of data where we've dragged corn twice up and back in the field at 5 stages. The control was no drag hose used. Then we could drag hose at V1, V2, V3, V4, and V5. So I have 5 years of that data, and there was no yield loss whatsoever until we hit V4. It wasn't statistically significant, but there was a couple bushel down. But at V5, you'll knock 45, 50 bushels off that yield pretty quick. And another way of doing that is just take your big old foot and put it on top of corn plant. If it snaps, it's too tall for the drag hose. If it doesn't snap, you can drag hose that field and feel pretty comfortable with it.
Brilliant. Okay, perfect. Thank you, Glenn. Appreciate that overview. Some pretty phenomenal photos there. What did we do when we didn't have drones? Wow, that's
Right.
some great photography. So, all right, next on our panel, I'm gonna invite Gerard Steenbeek to come on board here with us. Gerard's an Ontario farmer. He operates in a few counties in Ontario, a mixed livestock operation, large operation, and quite a few acres. So, Gerard, I'm going to turn it right over to you. Tell us who you are, what you're doing.
All right, thanks. Yeah, my name's Gerard. We operate two dairy farms. One's in Woodham, Ontario, and one is kind of Centralia. It's about 8 kilometers apart. And then we also have remote storage, and we have some pigs kind of on the side. So you can see we're spreading manure here. This is cereal rye. So like we were saying before, like we want to spread manure on uh, and growing crops. So that's certainly something we like to do. This is our home dairy farm. The middle barn is where we started back in 97, milking 100 cows. And now at this location in the crossend barn on the left side of the picture, we're milking about 700 cows. And it's mostly young stock and calves and some steers and the remainder of the barn. And then obviously we have all the feed storage. But you do notice here that in Ontario, or this part of Ontario at least, we can't have any lagoons. So we have big manure pits that hold about 2.5 million gallons each back there. We have a couple slotted barns. And then all our runoff right now, it's all goes in permanently vegetated strips. So like we don't have as much water to deal with as some of the US farmers do. So, and we're on clay loam soils here, and we don't irrigate at all here, or nor do our neighbors. Anyway, like I said, we farm in a couple counties, and that's because we're right at the intersections of 3 different counties. So what that means is that we deal with 3 different townships and 3 different counties, and we also farm on both sides of the provincial highway. The reason I bring this up is because we have to deal with different rules. It seems like every time we want to build something or put in a pipe or anything like that. It's been a little bit frustrating, and that's kind of makes it harder for us to be efficient in getting the manure further out. In 2025, we spread about 22.5 million gallons, and that is through our own tanks and drag hose. So that is all our manure. And then we had a couple million spread by our neighbors who do custom manure spreading while we were chopping corn silage. So while we are primarily dairy farm, we also do all our own field work. And that's really a timeliness thing. We just like to get onto the fields when they're fit and ready and be able to get as much done as possible. So we do have the big tanks with the tire inflation, all that kind of good stuff, but really these are too slow for getting a lot of manure out. And so like we have a couple fields that we can't get at, but like really, if I don't have to use the tanks, I'd be really happy. Like we much prefer drag hosing. So like just really reduce the compaction, but we still have to have them. So here's a little overview of our home farm right now. So I'm just gonna see that a little ahead of. Anyway, so what we got going on, we got the main dairy there in the middle, and then there's a red line that kind of runs through the thing through the middle there. So that kind of goes from our main manure storage to the field that's across the road. So that is our original manure pipeline that we put in. It's not miles long, but it does help a lot in being able to not have to have all the hoses across the yard, especially before when we only had one laneway going in and out. You lay out all the hoses through the yard. You have to tell people he can't come in, but at the same time, we also can't have the milk truck coming in and out. So it's got pretty old, but it was really limiting things. So here's our manure pipe that is buried when we were building the barns here. So from our manure storage to get to this field. And then here we got some existing culverts that we're using. So this is just a dirt road. So like we were able here to dig through the road. Here we haven't because we didn't really need to. But then here, the farm here is in Perth or Huron County, but then we also have fields in Perth County here. So this is a provincial highway. So it's just a 2-lane road, but it's still controlled by the province. So it comes with a lot of rules. So we are fortunate that we have some big culverts underneath the roads here that we are able to use so we can keep going. But I kind of dread the day that the province is just going to tell us like, hey, you can't use that culvert anymore. We've been doing it for 16 years and nobody's ever told us we can't, but I feel like eventually that's going to come. And then I kind of dread what the rules are going to be to actually put a pipe in underneath the road, because especially with the town here, it's already hard enough getting corn silage off that field with all the traffic that's got to go through town to get back to the dairy farm. So if I also have to put tanks also through the town, then I think a manure pipeline is much better. So we haven't really gotten to the point where we justify putting a pipe from here through the farm, but I think that might come eventually. These green lines here, that's kind of like where my next goals are. I really want to try to get make an agreement with this neighbor, but then I also get across these roads here still, because I do have 200 acres almost there that I would like to be able to spread on. And also this field here right now is also in tanks, but I still want to be able to drag hose that as well, but it's going to require some neighbors and probably some pipes still. So around the dairy, when we were milking only 300 or 400 cows, we weren't running big pumps and all that kind of stuff. So then we were putting in 6-inch hoses, and 6-inch pipes. So here, this picture is from 7 years ago when we were building a cross-vent dairy barn. And you can see that there's a pipe there that is a 6-inch plastic pipe. So that's kind of the precursor to what everybody's been doing with the high density polyethylene pipe. So this is bell and spigot, and you just kind of push them together, and then you got to put concrete on the corners so that the pipe stays in place. And then at the roadways, we have these risers that come up there, And then we have them marked. So these have in Ontario, or at least where we were, as long as we got those to come up above ground outside of the road allowance, they were pretty easy about that. But like I said, some of these were put in 10 years ago when the rules are simple. So the new more recent projects we've done is it's all with the high density polyethylene that was shown before. I think this is an 8-inch pipe. So my hands are not huge, but that's kind of, you can see how thick the wall is. And that's what some pipe we used for a road crossing in Perth County. So we also use this to transfer manure, like from some of the manure separators. So like at our dairy farm, we have sand bedding now, but we also separate green bedding for heifers. And then we also use composted manure solids for the secondary, and also a little bit for far off dry cows. This is our secondary, where we've kind of done some similar things. We also have the buried, we have the manure pits are down here, and then we have the buried pipe again. But here, what we're doing is our buried pipe actually crosses county lines. So south of here is Middlesex County, north of here is Huron County. So at that point, the roads guy in South Huron, say Huron County, the municipality of South Huron and Huron County was really excited about keeping tanker traffic off the road. So that guy really worked with us to convince the Luke and Vidolph guy on the Middlesex County side to help us get pipes underneath the road, so that when we built one of the barns here, we put the pipe in and we cross right underneath the road and go pump straight into another county, basically. And at that point, we also put in this because we do not own this farm in between at that time, so that we can spread either from the dairy across the road or from our little pig barn over here as well. And then over here, we're missing a field here, which we'll never own, but we've been able to convince the neighbor to let us run a hose across his field a couple times to get into this field here. And we've been approaching Middlesex County, who now owns this road, to get the road pipe across from here, so we don't have to rely on the neighbor anymore, and we can just get stuff done whenever, instead of whenever it works for the neighbor. Because when he is growing crops, obviously we can't always get at it. And like when I showed with the first picture on the opening slide, like we do try to grow a lot of rye and wheat after corn silage. And after corn silage comes off, we'll no-till rye, we'll no-till wheat. And then we'd like to get manure on that both in the fall and also in the spring again before it really starts to grow. So up here at the top too, we got some culverts that we've been able to use, and we have like these fields over there, but like we're right at the intersection. So it seems for every single job we do around here, we're always crossing at least one road. So these gravel roads in the past, we've been able to dig through. The road's pretty easy, and that's getting harder and harder now. It's I've heard some stories further down the road that the people installing fiber optic lines, they've been plowing through people's culverts that they were using to put manure pipes through. It kind of seems to be, if they're not marked well, then they do get damaged that way. So as you can see, we also have the manure bridges here. So this is actually at the far north side of that farm. This was actually the first time using it. So this is not ours. We rent the manure pipe or the manure bridge. And it's been a good solution for a couple fields. It's just, yeah, the availability for us is sometimes a problem, but it's an excellent solution for that. So this is the third kind of block of fields we have all together. So this is almost 500 acres here that's workable. And then right here in the middle here, we put in a manure tank here. So once again, like it has to be a concrete tank. So that's what it is. It's a 160-foot diameter by 12-foot deep. And we had to put it at the back because to put in a pit, the same rules apply to like the minimum distance separations as to a livestock farm. So when we had the pit put in, because this is in Perth South, in Perth County, so or county, we don't have any farms in. Basically, they would have to do the calculations based on the smelliest manure that you could possibly put into it. So in this case, even though we only put dairy manure in it, all the minimum distance calculations were done based on hog manure. So we kind of ended up putting it in the back of the farm, and then we had to run a laneway across so that we could get to the end of it. So we also did put a pipe here. So that's where that other picture of the HDPE pipe that we were able to bury through this gravel road here so that we could also drag these fields. So this pit here will fill up 3 times a year usually. So I work with a custom applicator that has a fleet of 4 trucks that they basically, whenever they have time, if they're not trucking for their own to keep their own drag line busy, they will just truck to me if I have room. So sometimes it's only half a pit, sometimes it's only one day. It's been half day sometimes. It's really set up to be really simple for them. As you can see in this picture here, they're dumping in the pit as we're pumping here. So they don't like that always because we can probably pump faster than they can bring it to us. But it's a good way for us to get at least all those acres covered, usually about twice a year, really, is what we can do. And that's been really convenient. The only problem we have with these remote pits is that we cannot get them filled in the spring. So like with half load season between April or March 1st or April 30th, we can't fill the pits. So like we can't get them filled for spring applying. So what we've been doing, since the truckers don't want to run in the really cold weather where the valves all freeze up on their trucks, we've actually been filling these usually the week before Christmas, as late as possible. When a lot of the other jobs are done, then we'll fill up this pit. So usually we're done spreading most of our manure by the end of November, and then we'll fill that pit one more time, and then we can just let it sit, and then it's ready to go for the spring season. So here's one of the trucks dumping in the dumpster. That is very similar to what's been shown before. When we trucked to these farms before a little bit, before we had the manure storage there, but just having the manure storage there just makes it so much more efficient. We can pump faster when we're pumping. If we're pumping and trucking at the same time, you can basically go forever. But it's for us, and just the timing wise is really nice, especially like when we have hay ground around those pits. Usually we always try to at least have 90 to 100 acres of hay right around that, and it's just super simple. Take the equipment over there and just drag that field. You don't have to wait for truck drivers. You don't have to wait for the dumpster, and like even the truck driver doesn't really need to bring anything else either. They can jump right over the wall. So as long as we got a tractor pump at the dairy, they can keep going. And for us, having a custom guy do it saves us from buying the trucks. And like if we had only one truck, for example, like if we have to have a tractor running all day to pump, like it would take weeks of tractor hours basically to really keep that going. So with them being able to fill up the pit in 2 days, it's a lot simpler for us. And with insurance and everything else, it's pretty cost effective. So anyway, with that pit for us, it's just a lot less compaction on that farm, like those 500 acres there. And like I said, like the manure, trucks can go on their schedule. They're not dependent on us. As long as I got one tractor available to run the pump, they can go. And like we're not wearing out our tractors and pumps. When we were like hauling to those fields, it was like days and days and days of spreading manure, and it's often we could not get it done in the fall on time, and then we have to wait on frost, and then you're driving through salt with the tractors and everything rust away. So it's a huge time savings for us, and like we feel like we can get field work done a lot quicker. So, and also like we're really trying to get into more applying manure in season and make better use of our manure. So like now with the remote storage, it allows us to do more of that as well. And that's kind of what we're moving forward towards as well. We've been looking at things like the Rain 360 as well, but we don't need the irrigation necessarily, and our manure is too thick. Like just a straight up dairy manure might not work well enough to do that. So we're kind of focusing on just regular manure applications. So things that we're struggling with a little bit is, especially the last little while, is like getting permission to go through roads, to dig under roads. Like it's not hard nowadays to do directional drilling, or if we dig through a gravel road, we'll put it back better than it was. But it seems 10 years ago it was easier than it is now. And like the one in First County I did a couple or 3 years ago, that was okay, sure, but Huron County right now, they won't let us do it. They say just get the manure bridge. And like, well, that's nice, but sometimes the weather is not cooperative to the point where I can get the manure bridge when the custom applicator is using it himself. And yeah, the half load season right now, we've lost this spring or spring 2025. We had a very nice spring. Conditions were great. Then you want to get manure out, and like we have great opportunities to do it. But yeah, the roads guys, they just say no, these are the rules. Yeah, too bad. So anyway, I think that's all I have right now.
That's awesome. Thanks, Gerard. Appreciate that. Gerard and Glenn, I'm going to invite you guys to, if you see questions in the chat that are specific to you, if you want to answer them now, just because our time is tight here, you guys can go ahead and do that. Meanwhile, Sean, I'm going to invite Sean forward here. Sean Barnes, who is the operations manager for Eusi Farms, and that's from Forest, Ontario. Sean, we appreciate you joining us. I know you're busy, so you're joining us by cell phone today. And so we'll ask Quinn to pull up your slides that you can run through in our last few minutes here. Sean, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Well, thanks for having me today. I'm operations manager here at UC Farms. We are a beef and cash crop operation. So here's a picture of our cattle. Next slide, if you wouldn't mind, please, Quinn. This is the inside of one of our barns and our founder. Next slide, please. So very similar to how Gerard does it, we have a very scattered land base, and so we find these frac tanks to be really a useful tool for us. We've got our own fleet of trucks, and we've got 3 trucks, and just the same as Gerard was saying, it's really a very flexible system. It doesn't, well, yeah, it's flexible. You just show up to the field and start pumping. And next slide, please. There's some of our trucks getting ready to be unloaded. Next slide. As well as side dress on our winter wheat as well. We've had really actually, so John Deere offers a NIR sensor, which allows us to get a live sample of the manure as we're applying it. And we find that is really useful with side dressing on winter wheat. It just allows us to put down exactly what we need, and then we're able to supplement with synthetic fertilizers as needed. Oh, there we go. Would you be able to use that, please? So, yeah, we use these tankers and surface applicators. We like the dribble bar to applicate manure in row, in crop. We've had really, really good success with this. It is kind of time consuming, but it has worked quite well. And the next slide, please. Okay, there's our applicator. And next slide. And here's us getting ready to pump. So that is one of our satellite pits. We have several satellite pits, just as you can see in the picture. We use cement side pits. Uh, they're something that we've departed from most people in with our pit sizing is that we tend to go small. We like our 1,000,000-gallon pits just because they're a lot easier to agitate. If you get some of these larger pits, like I know they have in the States, and some of the larger dairies here, you have to bring in some kind of a crawler or an agitation boat or something like that. These 1,000,000-gallon pits are really quite useful because we can use a vertical pit pump or something like that to agitate them. We find that to be much more cost effective. And next slide. We try to be a progressive farm here. And so we demoed this unit from Cadman last spring. It was a very interesting demo. This is the CMA Silver unit. It's a hard hose drag reel. And it allows you to inject manure in row in a drag line type situation, but without dragging the hose across the corn, which really opens up the window. It's really interesting technology. It it has the potential to allow you to fertilize crops with liquid manure, side dress with liquid manure until the corn is 3 feet tall or so. Um, Next slide, please. There's the applicator unit right there. And next slide. Okay, so that's just a sort of a quick overview of what we do here at UC Farms. Now, I do know that we're at the end of the time frame here, so I'll just pass it back to.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you very much. We will stay for a little conversation here, but I just want to set you up if you have to go for next week that we will be having a session on cover crops. So we've got Laura Van Erd, researcher from Ridgetown College, and along with a couple of farmers, and we're going to have a great conversation. So we'll look forward to that next week. These sessions are recorded, so you will get a link in about a week as to where you can find them. Basically, if you want to Google OMAFA field crop news and then look for March Manure Mondays, you'll find some of last year's and previous years, and the current ones will be posted within about a week. So let you know that. So, but I'll ask the guys just to come on the panel here just for a minute. Gerard and Sean and Glen. Wow, I mean, we could spend another hour talking about this, but listen, appreciate the technologies you showed. Very, very interesting to see how technology is stepping up. One of the questions I do want to address, because I don't know if it did get addressed in the chat, but I think it was it Frank who said, or sorry, Herman who said that, why all the surface application when we know that there's going to be more losses per se, as opposed to injection where there's fewer losses. So all these technologies, are looking at more surface application. So comments on that. Glenn, I'll start with you.
The older the commercial manure applicators get, the more likely they are to inject manure because they've had the sheriff's deputy at their doors at 2 o'clock in the morning and stuff like that. So the coulter tills that allow us to roll through the fields and till up dirt and apply the manure directly on top, that's getting popular with the well-established commercial manure applicators. But for wheat and hay, they still tendency to shoot it on top of ground.
Gerard, you want to add to that?
Yeah, like we've injected a little bit like with an airway style in the past. Like in spring we can't we can't disturb the soil that deep. Like it's hard to get our ground dry enough to plant to start with. So like to start working around in there we'd lose so much time anyway. And then we have a lot of hay ground that we spread manure on, a lot of alfalfa, a lot of rye, a lot of other stuff. So like really, and we lose a lot of nitrogen from fall application here anyway in our climate. It doesn't really seem worthwhile. Like as we're maybe side dressing more in corn, we could look at it, but like right now the economics just haven't really been there to inject it. So the dribble bar has been actually really good in between step. There's a lot less smell, a lot better placement. Like we've been really happy with the dribble bar compared to splash plates.
No, appreciate that, guys. Sean, there's a question that came in for you here. I don't know if you can see the chat or not, so I'll read it for you. It's talking about calibration problems. Have you had any calibration problems with the NIR, i.e., does the sensor accurately reflect your actual manure values? Can you comment on that?
I can for sure. So yes, when we initially got started with that technology, we were very hesitant about trusting it. So part of our manure program is we take a sample from every field and every pit that we pump from, and then what we do is we actually go out to the applicator and we take a sample directly from one of those drop hoses while the man in the tractor is recording the data from the NIR sensor. What we've found is that it is fairly accurate. I would say plus or minus about 5%. I would have to look up at the exact specifics. Some values are higher than recorded on the NIR sensor, and some are lower, but they're usually consistent.
Okay. Excellent.
But it's the same sensor, and like we've been pretty happy with it as well in the same way.
Okay. All right, beautiful. Thanks, Gerard. Gerard, you made a comment. You kind of alluded to how it's changed from, say, 10 or 15 years ago, getting permits, getting applications, dealing with municipalities. Do you want to elaborate that on a little bit more? And at this point in time, is it still an option to look at crossing highways, culverts, putting pipes in, that sort of thing?
I think it is an option, but like for example, if we have to when we crossed the Whalen line last time, we could just talk to the roads guy and they talked amongst each other, and like because we were dealing with two different municipalities, it was not a big deal. But now when I applied or when I was gonna apply to do it in 2022, like it had to be a pipe that had to extend 15 meters past the road allowance into my field. So now I have these obstacles sticking out, and then the pipe has to get tested before it goes into use, and then it has to get tested every 2 years. So like it does become quite an onerous thing. So I think it is going to be possible to do if you really, really want it, but like it's not as simple as it is anymore. It's like we cross roads all the time, so it's not hard to do, but it's I think it's just the demand is not there, or the the roads guys, they're not interested in it anymore so much. It feels like.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know if I would have to go past the roads guys and go to the municipality, like to the counselors to get it done. Like I feel it could get done, but I haven't tried it yet. But I might still in the near future.
Right on. I should mention as well, by the way, I know we had in the title for today that Martin Rowlands was also going to be on the panel. He's with OPACA, which is our custom applicators group here in Ontario. Unfortunately, Martin had to deal with a situation where he is moving manure further today to keep manure from moving closer on the farm. And I'll let you read between the lines on that. But anyhow, he was unable to join us, unfortunately. But it's interesting, that perspective, the custom applicator perspective as well. Glen, I'd like to ask you to comment on neighbors, what you've been hearing from folks in terms of getting agreements, in terms of moving pipes across land, things like that, considerations for neighbors. Can you start that conversation?
Well, if your neighbors are farmers, usually they'll be cooperative. If you were, a good player when you built or you expanded your farm, we had some Dutch farms that came in 20 years ago. A lot of people would not allow them to cross their property with manure because they were outsiders. They weren't known. But now that they've established themselves and are good players, and then they provide manure for these neighbors, the opportunity to cross their line has been pretty good. On the polyethylene pipe that Bridgewater was putting in, if the field had a lot of great field tile in it, they burrowed underneath that. They bored under all those field tiles because cutting and fixing them would have just been a pain in the butt. And then on ground that they did own, then they used a backhoe to trench most of that in. But I found that neighbors will work with you after a few years and they see that you're all right.
Sean, you got any comments on the neighbor front with this moving manure further?
Yeah. But and I would have to agree. Yeah, farmers are not the issue. Um, by and large, they're fairly friendly. It is people living in towns and even some people living in rural areas um, that are more unhappy with it. And so what we do is we try to make sure that our trucks are as nondescript as possible, and that's about it. A lot of times they get angry if they have to slow down on the roadway for a slow moving vehicle, a tanker, something like that. As soon as you go to a highway tractor, they're not slowing down. They don't see immediately that it belongs to a farm, and so they tend to be a lot happier with that.
And Gerard, you've made this work in some cases, so your comments?
Yeah, no, it with farmers, especially if you're willing to give them some manure, they'll let you run a hose across the field pretty quick. We've had good luck doing that. We Farmers are always looking for manure. I find like if I'm looking to buy straw, they're always willing to trade for manure. And fortunately, that's not always possible logistically, but like we've had good luck with that. And I do think part of having the remote storage and working with trucks, it's been a lot better for traffic as well. I've seen it as well. People trying to pass tractors with manure tanks on the left side, ignoring turn signals, people ending up in the ditch, and we haven't had any of those problems with trucks. It's like it's the same amount of loads, but it seems to go better with trucks than it does with tractors going down the road.
Interesting. And Glen, there's a final question here about the 360 rain, and I have to tell you, I wish I'd patented that. When I was a teenager, I was growing strawberries, and I didn't have an irrigation system, so I took an old sprayer on the farm, and I put a rubber hose out the back, and I drove it real slow down the field, and that was my irrigation system, and it cost nothing. And I know what those units cost. I wish I had patented that idea back 40 years ago. But anyhow, comments on that. The question was about neighbor issues with the 360 rain. They see them going down the field and there's nobody on it.
Yeah. I had one guy tell me that you can now smell manure every week of the summer instead of just once or twice a year. But again, when you look at the height of that corn, you look at mostly gray water and fairly low nutrient product going out there. I guess I'd have a hard time believing you could get a lot of odor out of them. I mean, I take my time. I shoot a lot of drone of them. I follow them through the fields, and I've always thought they were pretty low odor type situation. So again, that's one neighbor, and you know, I don't put too much stock in just one comment.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. Any final comments? Anybody that something we haven't covered? I know there's still the conversation could keep going here, but Gerard, any final comments?
No, I really I hope that with townships we can sometimes like figure things out a little bit better. And like I think there's a lot of potential to do things better and to like if we can figure this out, we can do more in season like we all want to do, and I think it'd be a good thing.
Yeah. And Sean, you've been trying some new things with the Cadman and so on. You got a wish list or what you're gonna try next?
Well, yeah, there's lots of things I'd love to try. No, we're just going to continue on with the way we're doing things. Hopefully, we will be looking into some underground pipelines. That's something we really want to get into. We haven't had any luck so far. We've been turned down a few times, but it is something that we're going to continue working on.
God, I might have had that 360 unit in Ohio for a couple summers. I'm not sure if it's the same one or not. Had 11 shanks on it, and we
Yep,
busted it a few times.
yep. Actually, that would be the exact same one that came out to our farm.
Right
I
on.
th I like the concept.
Small
I
world.
really do. I really like the concept, but it had a few gremlins in it that we never did get worked out.
Yes, it did.
Very good. Glenn, if folks want to reach out to you, maybe see some of your videos, I know you've shown some great videos over the last few years. Where's the best place for them to reach you?
I post a lot of them on my university Facebook page. I think it's called Ohio State Extension Environmental and Manure Management. Haven't posted much lately this winter, but all summer long I'll post videos, sometimes as many as 3 or 4 or 5 a week. And so again, I get around. My commercial applicators say it's the only positive PR they get. So, I always show them in their best light, doing their best job. We skip the manure spills and the hose bursts and all the other things that we go through.
Right on. Awesome. Well, Christine Brown makes the final comment here. She said it would be nice to have the province-wide standard operating procedures for crossing roads. I think we can all agree that we will not let Christine Brown retire until she gets such a thing in place. So, Christine, we will leave that with you. But thank you very much, everybody. Thanks to our panel, to Gerard, Arnold, and Sean Glenn and Sean for a great session today. Will be recorded, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week. Cheers.
All righty.
Thanks.
Thank you.